we want to be able to show you our risk quantifier product. And the goal of this product is really just to help you report risk. And we're going to use this terminology from the board to the byte, right? So we want to be able to help you report risk for your various audiences. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that and talk about how do we go about doing that. So we're going to kind of start right in the middle for maybe your CISO audience, right? Because these are the types of people that need to understand what their risks are, but then also what to do about it. So when you go into the platform, this is where we're able to show you. If you had, for example, a data breach over your customer management system, let's say, we are able to tell you how much risk exposure you're going to have if that happens. We also tell you what the likelihood or the probability of this particular type of an attack happening within your environment specifically. And then we also tell you how frequently will that happen. And a lot of this, and I know you may be asking those questions as far as where do we get this data from, right? So this is where we are able to pull in our over 40 years worth of industry data. And that's a global data set, right? So we get that from a variety of different sources, but what we do is we allow you to give us the context, right? So we allow you to place your information on top of our loss models. Throughout everything in here, we want to take the, we call it the critique versus create approach, right? We want to allow you to critique the data instead of saying, well, where do I get this data, or to generate that data for yourself. So that's another aspect of the platform. But as I mentioned, the goal is to help report your risks from all the way from the very top, all the way down to the very bottom. So the next piece of that puzzle is being able to say, okay, well, you've now shown me what my risks are. What's that next step? What can we do about that? Well, that's where the platform, what it will do is actually provide you automatic recommendations. So for example, this is a sample NIST CSF assessment. So the platform, what it does is it shows you if you were able to improve your maturity from a level 2 to a level 3, right? What would that look like? And we give you a couple of different views into that. One is it from the attack perspective. So if you want to look at it from a data breach, what are some of those things that you can put into place to reduce your risk from a data breach? We also give you the view into your control environment, and this is agnostic of any individual applications, agnostic of any individual attack, right? And then so we show you how much risk reduction opportunity there would be. And then finally, one of the most powerful aspects is being able to say, well, how much is that going to cost you, right? This is where you're able to say, hey, look, this is going to cost us X amount, and therefore, you can make that decision, or you can inform that decision maker to say, here's your options of which to potentially reduce this risk. What do you want to do about it? Do you want to make this improvement or that improvement? Which one is going to provide that better return on investment or return on security spend? Now, again, taking that next layer, right? So the first layer is saying, hey, here's what your risks are. Here's what you can do about it from a high level perspective. The next aspect is, well, what are some specific things you can fix, right? So if you give it to us, we actually can take it a step further and actually tie in your vulnerability scanners. And what we're able to do is we're actually able to help you prioritize your vulnerabilities by financial exposure. Now, we're not going out and actively scanning your environment, right? You don't have to buy another tool just to, or another add-on just to do this, right? We actually fit into your existing security stack. So if you have Tenable, Rapid7, Qualys, doesn't matter what the vulnerability scanner is, we're able to help augment those results that you get. So instead of you seeing that you have 3 different critical vulnerabilities and struggling to determine maybe which critical is more critical than the other critical, right? We're actually able to tell you, look, here's how much risk exposure you have to this individual vulnerability. Now, and that could be because it's on multiple endpoints. It could be because it's on multiple applications, as well as it being exploitable in the wild, right? So it's meant to help augment that data that you are getting from the best-in-class vulnerability scanners in this particular example. Now, again, the goal is to be able to, again, report risks from the board to the byte. Well, the next piece of that is, well, what are the specific endpoints, right? So if you have that mapped down to the endpoint level, we can actually tell you, hey, you should patch these individual endpoints first, because those are the ones that are posing the most risk to your organization, right? So it helps you really get as deep into the weeds as you would like. Now, just like any other risk quantification platform, one thing that we also like to do is, and especially when you're trying to report on your risks, is what can you do about it? So we have a couple of different ways in which to look at that. We have an entire section that allows you to do what we call a what if analysis, right? So for example, what if you change your controls for a particular application? Now notice I didn't say improve or improve your controls, right? You can do that, but this also allows you to say, well, what happens if we decide to maybe reduce our spend on a particular control? How is that going to change your risk, right? It helps to inform your decision as far as, is this an acceptable delta, right? Is this an acceptable change, either positive or negative? Now, we also recognize that your environment is dynamic, right? Things are changing, right? So therefore, maybe you're noticing an increase in or decrease in the rate of incidents for your particular applications, for your attacks. You can run a what if on that without it actually affecting your overall risk calculation, unless you want it to. Now, one thing I didn't mention earlier is our platform actually has 3 different models for calculating risk. So I'll come back to the scenarios here, but just to show you what those 3 different models are. One is our machine learning model, right? This is really the easy button when it comes to risks, right? It leverages our machine learning as well as our industry data and allows you to put in some context behind that. Now, we are also part of the open group, so therefore we do support the use of the FAIR model for those of you that are familiar with it. But if for those of you that aren't, it's basically the probable frequency and probable magnitude of future loss. It basically allows you to run a Monte Carlo simulation on your data. So it requires you to input the data that you want, both in maximum most likely, and both on the frequency side and the magnitude side, and it can run those calculations. And then the third model that we have is actually something we call semi-automated FAIR. So this allows you to leverage our machine learning attack-based models or attack path modeling, as well as our industry loss data in a FAIR analysis and run those Monte Carlo simulations, right? So these are the different types of analyses. And again, we allow you to do as many as you would like from that perspective. Now, again, going back to that reporting aspect, right? So some organizations want to be able to report their analyses via FAIR. Others want to do specific what ifs. Others want to ask the question of, well, how much risk do I have to my PII information or personally identifiable information, right? You're able to run a what if directly on that. Again, so it allows it to be done very quickly. So not just being able to, again, report from the board to the byte, but also allowing you to look at very specific things and answer very specific questions that you may be getting asked by your stakeholders. Now, I don't know if many of you were on our last conversation that we had around CRQ, but some new functionality we just launched within the platform is actually taking it one layer deeper, right? So we talked about we can take a high-level approach. You start maybe talking from the board. You may be able to show, hey, here's what your risk is. Here's what you can do about it. But we also want to allow you to take a risk-led approach to your threats, which is why we also allow you to work down at the MITRE attack level, right? So you can get very in the weeds. Again, you don't have to, But again, if your organization and you have very specific things that you want to look at, you're able to do that. So what you're able to do is instead of you defining, oh, all of this information, you just tell us what's the thing of value, what's the thing at risk, what is the attacker group, what's the capability of that attacker group. And then we allow you to either do one of two things. We allow you to say, hey, we are worried about these individual MITRE tactics and techniques, and you can choose yours, or you can actually leverage our historical data set as well, right? So we do have historical attacks from the MITRE perspective that allow you to automatically select this. However, we do have other organizations that may have a very mature threat intel perspective, or threat intel operations. So you may be looking at very specific groups like Midnight Blizzard or APT 27, or insert whatever threat actor group you would like. Right? And you've done your research as far as these are the individual techniques or tactics that they're using. So again, you can choose your own as well. And then the last piece of this is we allow you to say, okay, well, what defenses do you have in place? And again, if you enable this and if you allow us to it, you can actually tie in your existing security stack. Again, we are not going out and actively scanning your environment. We don't require you to put agents on your computers and look at various things, right? We'll tie in with your EDR tools, with your CrowdStrike's, Defender, your vulnerability scanners, whatever security stack you are using. So it allows you to leverage the best in class from the security toolset perspective and tie that into CRQ. And what it will do is it allows you or enables the platform to say, hey, here are some specific observations about your environment. And then also, here's the coverage of those particular controls. So for example, your antivirus and anti-malware is fully enabled and up to date. Those are things that can physically be observed within your environment using your security stack. So it's able to show you, hey, here's what that looks like. And therefore, these are the things that could potentially prevent an attack from happening. Now, this is where we give you a variety of different ways of ingesting or of consuming that data. One is allowing you to say, okay, well, from the attack navigator perspective, which are my individual techniques and tactics? Which ones should I be focusing on as an organization? Whether that be under the responsibility of the risk team to say, hey, look, we need to focus here, or maybe it's your CATI team or your threat intel teams, right? Or your threat defense, right? As far as trying to determine where do we need to focus our efforts, right? So we give you this view, as well as taking it a step further and allowing you to say, okay, what are the biggest areas from a techniques and tactics perspective, right? Which one's posing the most risk? So we're actually able to tell you. So for example, if this was Midnight Blizzard as an example, right? We are able to tell you which are the tactics and techniques that you're most susceptible to within your organization based upon your controls. But again, we don't just stop there. We take it a step further. We actually tell you what are the toggles, what are the triggers that you can turn on or off within your environment to reduce your risk. And you're able to see that very quickly and see what that risk reduction would be. Now, again, our goal is to enable you to communicate at whatever level you're trying to, whether that be very in the weeds and you're trying to talk to your vulnerability management team, whether you're talking to your application owners, whether you're talking to your CISO, whether you are the CISO and you're trying to talk to the board and you're trying to help them understand how much risk exposure, what should they do about this? Is it an acceptable amount of risk? So that's where we also give you a lot of other reporting. One of those is actually a quantitative heat map. Now, I know some of you are maybe thinking like, well, heat maps are terrible, right? You're right in general, right? But they can be done and they can be used in an effective way in which to communicate your risks, especially as you go higher up the chain. what this allows you to do is, instead of you deciding where the dots go in your typical heat map, the platform will actually map that for you, right? It'll actually say, look, based on the parameters you set, here are our thresholds for each one of the various levels. And oh, look, here's the ones that are posing the most risk to your organization. So therefore, dig deeper into that one. Now, some organizations also, and you may be one of them, like to, or you're maybe just starting out with risk quantification, right? And you're like, well, we still need to report qualitatively. We give you that ability to report that very same heat map in qualitative terms. So it allows you to bridge that gap between qualitative and quantitative in a very defensible fashion. Now, we also, as I mentioned, we give you ways of breaking that down so that way you're able to say, hey, my incident response team, here's how much we're spending from a remediation perspective, right? Does this track with what we're actually seeing? What do we need to do? All right, legal team, here's what we can forecast to our losses are going to be, right? What can we do about this? And we also give you the ability, I'm saying we're also a lot, but there's a lot of different things that you can do within the platform. And one of those is actually, if maybe you're a more mature organization and you're like, hey, this is great, but we want to use our own data. We want to use we have some of our own pieces that we think is better than yours. Great. We allow you to edit every single data point within the platform, as well as add some of your own formulas in there, whether that be a formula for reputation damage. Right? I know that's a hot topic for a lot of organizations, right? So you're able to actually say A plus B equals C, put that into the model and see where that fits in our overall risk perspective. And as I mentioned, we give you the ability to edit every single data point within the platform. So therefore, again, you're trying to contextualize this as much as you can for your organization. You can get in there and do that, right? It allows you to improve that communication, and it allows you to say, look, this is based on our data, right? And it adds that defensibility into your overall analysis. Now, again, because communicating throughout the entire organization is important, you may not want to give just flat access to the platform. What we've seen a lot of customers do is say, hey, I want to be able to get this data out of the platform. What does that look like, right? So you're actually able to get every single data point out of the platform as well. So that allows you to push it back into maybe a GRC platform or your own dashboarding, right? Whether you want to use Power BI or Tableau, right? We also give you the ability, if you want to give them access to the platform, they can choose what are most relevant for them, right? We widgetize, and a very technical term there, the dashboard to say, hey, here's the things that you care about. Great, you can have that view just for yourself. And again, as risk tends to be not just your insiders, right? Your first party risk. We also give you the ability to, again, tie in your existing security stack and measure your third parties. We give you an entire section that allows you to carve out your third parties and say, hey, what third party risk management team, what do our risks look like? We have existing integrations with third party partners like Security Scorecard, your BitSights, your Ionics, right? UpGuard, any of those. So instead of you defining, hey, what controls do we have in place? You can take that scan and say, hey, look, here's the scan for SAP, right? What can we do about it? Should we bring this vendor on, right? The whole goal is to enable those decisions, enable informed decisions throughout your organization. Now, in addition, you may get, as you start presenting some of these, the defensibility aspect, right? We have an entire section that talks about how we go about breaking down losses. How do we go about calculating that probability of success? Do we backtest the model? And the answer is yes, we all do. So it's not a black box. We try and make sure we give you enough information in which to communicate what you need to within your organization at whatever level, whether you're talking to the board or all the way down to your tactical teams that are actually fixing some of the challenges or implementing some of those controls. Now, as your organization grows, right, you may also want to report risk across your environment. This is where we're able to actually say, hey, what does your large organization, maybe you want to break this down by geographic region. That's how you're reporting on risk. Or maybe you have different companies underneath yours and each company is responsible for fixing their own things. We give you what we call a portfolio view, allowing you to look across your quote unquote legal entities or lines of business or whatever you want to define that as. Right. And so it allows you to have that view in a very consistent fashion. Now, we can get into the details of how do you put in everything in here. But the whole purpose of this conversation is to show you, here's what you can do from the board to the byte, and how you go about reporting on that. So I will open it up to questions to you all, but let me go ahead and answer some of the questions that we typically get around risk quantification, right? How do you do it? Well, the first piece of information we give you, or we ask for, is what industry you're in, what's your size from a revenue perspective, and location. Those are all important factors because a manufacturing company is different than a financial services company. And more specifically, a manufacturing company or financial services company in the US is different than what it would be in the EU or maybe other locations as well, right? So we're telling the platform what type of context to apply to the scenarios in which you're running. We also get questions around, well, how do I account for my controls? What if I'm using the NIST CSF or the CIS control frameworks? Absolutely. We support the use of any control framework that you can imagine, right? Obviously, we have all the ones out of the box, but we can also support custom control frameworks as well, right? So maybe you're using a mixture of a variety of different frameworks. We can get that as an option for you within the platform. Another thing is from an integrations perspective, what do you integrate with? Well, as I mentioned, we will integrate with whatever systems you have. And if there's a particular integration that you want that we don't have, we have a very great feedback process to say, hey, we would like this integration. Here's what we want to get. So it's not a matter of can we integrate with it? It's a matter of what information do you want to pull from there? And then really, other than that, there's a variety of different questions as far as what can you do about this? What's the support look like? Number of users, right? We try and make everything very simple for you, right? We don't like the feature gating. We don't like you getting stuck within the platform and saying, I can't do what I'm trying to do, right? We give you full access to the platform, right? So we don't feature gate anything within the platform. And then we also don't limit you on the number of users as well, right? So these are all things that you're able to just get the value out of this in the way that makes sense for your organization. And then lastly, as I mentioned, if you want to also just give specific things, right? Maybe you want to be able to answer some questions like, how much cyber insurance do I need? Okay, well, you don't need to get very detailed on that, right? We actually have an entire section within the platform that allows you to ask 3 simple questions: what industry you're in, what's your size, and do you have data, right? And then we're able to apply that to our loss models to help you answer those questions of, well, would this be a material event for my organization? Especially if you're publicly traded, you may need to say, hey, what would be a material event, and be able to answer that question. Or you're able to say, hey, I want to insure against my 80th percentile. Do I have enough cyber insurance coverage? Maybe your insurance is $400 million as an example. Well, you're able to quickly see if you have potentially enough coverage, as well as breaking that down into the individual loss types. And then from a defensibility perspective, we also give you the ability to have peer analytics to say, hey, where do I stack up among my peers in my industry, whether it be from a loss or a revenue size perspective. So you're actually able to see very specific things in the platform that can be used to ultimately help tell that story. So I'm going to pause and see what other questions that the team may have. We're going to open this up to you all um, and kind of go from there. And feel free to put any of your questions in the chat that is monitored, and we'll kind of go from there. Bree, have we had any pre-submitted questions?
No, let me go double check, but I didn't see any. Yeah, please, anyone, feel free to add anything in the chat. And if not, we can, Tim, if there's anything else you want to share, we can share that and then wrap up already.
Absolutely. One question that we usually get in these events is, will this information be shared? Yep, absolutely. We will post this on our website, so that way you can go back and share this with other people within your organization, and they'll be able to access this as well. One final comment, as some of these questions are coming in, is we will try and help you throughout your entire journey, right? We will provide things within the platform that work into the direction of which we're going. And ultimately where we're going is being able to allow you to do that continuous controls monitoring, right? Being able to say, based upon these factors, you are a level 3 of a maturity perspective. We're getting there, right? So stay tuned for some of the future webinars that we're going to do around Risk Quantifier, and you'll be able to see some of that functionality. So with that, we thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot those over. And even afterwards, you can feel free to send us a note, and we'll be able to answer those offline as well. So at this point, this is the presentation. Thank you so much for your time today. And if you have anything else, feel free to let us know. Thank you so much.